Captain Adam Cole stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova and watched the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. After 3 months of travel through unknown space, they had finally reached Nexus Prime, the capital of the Galactic Confederation. His hands were steady, but his heart was beating fast. This was the moment that would change everything for humanity. "Sir, we're getting a message from the station," said Lieutenant Katie White from her position at communications. "They're speaking in perfect English." Adam nodded. The aliens had been monitoring Earth's radio signals for decades before making contact. They knew human languages better than most humans did. "Put it through." A smooth voice filled the bridge. "Welcome to Nexus Prime, humans. Please follow the guidance beacons to Docking Bay 7. Our council is eager to meet with your species." Dr. Henry Blake, the mission scientist, looked up from his datapad. "The energy readings from that station are incredible. It's at least 50 times larger than anything we've ever built." Adam tried not to show how impressed he was. Humanity had worked for 2 years to build this single ship for their first diplomatic mission. These aliens had built a city in space that housed millions of beings from hundreds of different worlds. The docking process was smooth. As they walked through the station's corridors, Adam's team saw their first aliens up close. The creatures were strange but not frightening. Most looked like they had evolved from plant eaters. They had large eyes, small mouths, and moved in gentle, flowing ways. Many stopped to stare at the humans with curious expressions. Commander Lisa Park, humanity's chief diplomat, whispered to Adam as they walked. "They seem peaceful enough. Maybe this will go better than we thought." They were led to a huge chamber with a curved ceiling that showed the stars above. Dozens of different alien species sat in comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. At the center sat a tall, thin being with silver skin and 4 arms. "I am Council Speaker Vexhai of the Zenthari," the being said in that same smooth voice they had heard earlier. "Welcome to our Confederation, young humans. We have been watching your world with great interest." Lisa stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Thank you for this opportunity, Speaker Vexhai. We come seeking friendship and trade between our peoples." Several aliens made soft sounds that might have been laughter. A creature that looked like a giant butterfly spoke up. "Friendship? How charming. Tell me, human, how many wars has your species fought in the last century?" Lisa's face stayed calm, but Adam saw her jaw tighten slightly. "We have had conflicts, yes, but we've also made great progress toward peace and cooperation." "Progress," repeated a blob-like creature with too many eyes. "Your species has weapons that can destroy entire cities. You live on a world where the weather itself tries to kill you. Your largest predators hunt in packs. How can such violent beings speak of peace?" Dr. Blake stepped forward. "If I may, honored counselors, Earth's challenges have made us strong and adaptable. We've learned to work together to survive difficult conditions." The silver-skinned speaker raised one of his 4 hands. "Please, Dr. Blake, we understand your world's nature very well. Earth is what we call a death world. Most civilized species would die within days on your planet. The fact that your kind survived shows remarkable toughness, but it also explains your violent tendencies." "Violent tendencies?" Adam couldn't keep quiet anymore. "We're here peacefully. We came unarmed and with open hands." "Of course you did," said the butterfly creature sweetly, "and we appreciate that. But you must understand, young species, that your entire evolution has been shaped by violence. Every day on your world was a fight to survive. This has left marks on your mind and soul that cannot be easily erased." Speaker Vexhai leaned forward. "We have dealt with many species from harsh worlds before. The pattern is always the same. They believe they have moved beyond their violent nature, but when pressed, they return to old ways. It is not your fault, humans. It is simply what you are." Lisa took a deep breath. "What exactly are you suggesting, Speaker?" "We are offering you protection," Vexhai said with what might have been a smile. "The galaxy can be dangerous for unprepared species. There are pirates, hostile governments, and other threats. Under our guidance, humanity can find its place in galactic civilization." The blob creature added, "We have programs to help species like yours, education systems to reduce aggressive impulses, genetic therapy to calm violent instincts. Within a few generations, your people could be truly civilized." Adam felt a chill run down his spine. "And if we refuse this help?" The room went quiet. Finally, Speaker Vexhai spoke again. "Why would you refuse help? We offer you technology, knowledge, and peace. All we ask in return is that you allow us to guide your development. Surely that is better than the chaos and conflict of your current existence." Dr. Blake was studying his scanner. He caught Adam's eye and shook his head slightly. The readings he was getting didn't match what they were being told about these peaceful species. Lisa tried again. "We appreciate your offer, but we would prefer to develop as equal partners rather than students. We have technologies and knowledge that might benefit your confederation as well." More of those soft laughing sounds came from around the room. "Equal partners?" said the butterfly creature. "My dear humans, you have barely left your home system. Your technology is primitive by our standards. Your social structures are chaotic. What could you possibly offer us that we don't already have?" "Our perspective," Adam said firmly. "We see problems differently because we grew up facing different challenges. Sometimes an outside view can solve problems that have puzzled experts for years." Speaker Vexhai made a gesture with two of his hands. "How wonderful. The young species wants to teach their elders. This is exactly the kind of thinking that shows why guidance is necessary." The meeting continued for several more hours, but the pattern was set. Every human suggestion was met with patient condescension. Every offer of partnership was turned into an offer of supervision. By the time they returned to their ship, Adam's team was frustrated and worried. "They're not interested in equals," Lisa said once they were back in private. "They want pets." Dr. Blake was looking at his readings again. "There's something else. My scans show that several of the species in that room have the same genetic markers, as if they were once very different but have been changed to be more alike." Adam stared out at the massive station surrounding their tiny ship. Somewhere in his gut, he knew this was the beginning of something terrible. The Confederation's offer of protection was starting to sound more like a threat. Outside, alien ships moved in perfect formations around the station. Beautiful, peaceful, and somehow completely wrong. Adam wondered if those ships had ever belonged to species that had also been offered help. Species that no longer existed as they once were. The next morning, they would receive the Confederation's formal terms for humanity's integration. Reading those terms would make everything clear. 3 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Confederation. Captain Jake Miller stood in the command center of Liberty Station and watched alien ships patrol human space. The ships moved in perfect lines, never changing course, never showing any sign of the chaos that made human tactics so effective. "Another inspection today," said his second officer, Lieutenant Carol Webb. "That makes 4 this week." Jake nodded grimly. The Confederation called them safety checks, but everyone knew better. They were looking for signs that humans were building weapons or developing technology without permission. Every piece of equipment had to be approved by alien supervisors. Every new invention had to pass through committees that took months to make decisions. Down in the engineering section, Claire Adams was having another argument with her Zenthari supervisor. The alien's forearms moved in graceful patterns as it explained why her new engine design was unacceptable. "The power output is too high," Supervisor Kelth said in its musical voice. "Peaceful species do not need such aggressive propulsion systems. Your design could be modified to create weapons." Claire bit back her first 3 responses. All of them would have gotten her in trouble with the Cultural Adjustment Board. The increased power would let our cargo ships carry more food and medicine to the outer colonies. People are going hungry because our current ships are too slow. "Hunger builds character," Kelth replied. "Your species must learn patience. Everything you need will be provided in due time, according to Confederation schedules." Claire looked at her workstation, where months of careful calculations were being deleted by alien oversight programs. She had designed engines that could cut travel time in half, but the Confederation wanted humans to stay slow and dependent. On the agricultural world of New Texas, Farmer Ben Carter was packing the last of his belongings into boxes. Confederation officials had declared his settlement too militaristic because the colonists had built walls to keep out the local predators. The fact that the predators were 10-foot-tall lizards with acid spit apparently didn't matter. "Where are we supposed to go?" asked his wife Martha as she held their crying baby. The hegemony official, a creature that looked like a walking tree, rustled its leaves in what might have been sympathy. "Relocation centers have been prepared on Harmony Station. You will be much safer there, away from the violent influences of frontier life." Ben had seen the relocation centers, tiny apartments where families lived on processed food and watched educational programs about proper galactic citizenship. The people who came back from those places were different, quieter, less human somehow. "What about our farm? We've spent 5 years building this place. The land will be used for approved Confederation purposes," the official said. "Your primitive farming methods were damaging the ecosystem anyway. Automated systems will be much more efficient." Ben looked out at the fields where his crops grew, in neat rows. His primitive methods had increased food production by 30% over Confederation estimates. But efficiency wasn't really the point. Control was. Back on Earth, Ambassador Karen Scott sat in her office reading reports that made her stomach turn. The Confederation was implementing new cultural modification programs in human schools. Children were being taught that competition was evil, that individual achievement was selfish, that humanity's history was one long mistake that needed to be corrected. Her assistant, Danny Brooks, brought her the latest statistics. Test scores are dropping across all subjects, but aggression indicators are down by 15%, so the Confederation considers the program a success. Karen threw the report on her desk. "They're making our children stupid and calling it progress." "The Cultural Board says it's temporary," Danny replied. "Once human aggressive instincts are properly managed, educational performance will improve." "Managed," Karen repeated bitterly. She had been fighting this battle for 3 years, sending report after report to the Confederation Council. Every response was the same polite dismissal. Humans simply couldn't understand what was best for them. In the intelligence section of Earth Defense Command, Lieutenant Commander Troy Davis was putting together pieces of a much larger puzzle. His job was supposed to be monitoring external threats, but what he was finding was far more disturbing. "Look at this," he said to his analyst, Sergeant Lisa Chen. He pulled up a star chart showing Confederation space. 17 species have joined the Confederation in the last 200 years, but only 3 of them still exist as separate entities. Lisa studied the data. What happened to the others? Officially, they evolved beyond the need for separate identity. They became fully integrated Confederation citizens. Troy switched to another display. Unofficially, they were absorbed. Their unique cultures, their technologies, their entire way of life was gradually replaced with standard Confederation norms. The evidence was hidden in historical records and genetic databases that the Confederation thought humans were too primitive to understand. Species after species had followed the same pattern. First contact, then protection, then cultural adjustment, then integration, then nothing. No trace of what they had been before. "The Corvin used to be warriors," Troy said, showing pictures from old archives. "Poets and fighters who created some of the most beautiful art in the galaxy. Now they're clerks and maintenance workers who write reports in standard Confederation format." Lisa pulled up another file. The Thaxians were a hive-mind species that could solve complex problems by thinking together. Their collective intelligence was supposed to be incredible. Now they work in isolation, following individual work assignments, like every other Confederation citizen. Their ability to think as a group has been completely suppressed. Troy leaned back in his chair. "We're not the first Deathworld species they've encountered. The Rakari evolved on a world even more dangerous than Earth. Their military technology was centuries ahead of anything the Confederation had. What happened to them? They became peaceful. Very peaceful. So peaceful that they forgot how to defend themselves when pirates attacked their colonies. The Confederation had to step in and provide protection. Now Rakari serve as personal guards. for Confederation officials, but they're not allowed to carry weapons. The pattern was always the same. Take away their ability to fight, make them dependent on Confederation protection, then gradually erase everything that made them unique. The process took generations, but it was thorough. "How long do we have?" Lisa asked. Troy looked at the latest cultural adjustment reports. Human birth rates were dropping. Aggression indicators were falling. Creative thinking scores were declining. At current rates, maybe 50 years before we become just another Confederation client species. Outside Earth's atmosphere, Confederation monitoring stations recorded every conversation, every transmission, every sign of human activity. The aliens were patient. They had time. And they had done this before. But in hidden bunkers and secret laboratories, humans were beginning to prepare for something the Confederation had never faced. A species that knew what was happening and refused to go gently into that peaceful night. The emergency meeting was called at 3 a.m. General Peter Hayes sat at the head of the table in Earth Defense Command, looking at faces that showed the same mix of anger and fear he felt in his gut. The message from New Haven Colony had arrived 6 hours ago, and its contents changed everything. "Read it again," he said to his aide, Captain Nancy Ford. Nancy's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she held the data pad. "Confederation fleet elements have established a blockade around New Haven Colony. All incoming and outgoing traffic is suspended pending resolution of security concerns. Colonial administration has been transferred to Confederation authority, pending cultural adjustment reviews." Colonel Steve Martinez slammed his fist on the table. "Security concerns? They're farmers and miners. The only weapons they have are hunting rifles for the local wildlife." "That's exactly the problem," said Dr. Rita Kane, the mission's xenopsychologist. "The Confederation doesn't understand why humans need weapons at all. They see a hunting rifle and think military preparation." General Hayes pulled up the intelligence report that Lieutenant Commander Troy Davis had delivered the day before. "It's worse than that. This isn't about weapons. New Haven was chosen because it's isolated, and the colonists have been organizing cultural resistance programs. They've been teaching their children real human history instead of Confederation-approved versions." The room went quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. New Haven wasn't just being blockaded. It was being made an example. "What about the medical supplies?" asked Dr. Sandra Bell, the mission's chief medical officer. "New Haven has an outbreak of Rigel fever. Without treatment, people will start dying within days." Nancy checked her pad again. "All medical shipments require Confederation approval. The approval process takes a minimum of 6 weeks. 6 weeks, General Hayes repeated. Half the colony will be dead by then. 3 days later, Captain Sam Turner was loading medical supplies onto his transport ship Freedom's Call. The ship was clearly marked with red crosses and carried no weapons beyond basic asteroid defense systems. His crew of 12 volunteers knew they might not come back from this mission. "Sir, Confederation fleet is hailing us," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Mike Ross. "Put them through." The screen filled with the image of Admiral Kythera of the hegemony species. The alien looked like a cross between a shark and a tree, with gray bark-like skin and too many teeth. "Human vessel, you are entering restricted space. Turn back immediately." "Admiral, this is a medical relief mission," Sam replied. "We're carrying vaccines and antibiotics for sick colonists. No weapons, no military equipment, just medicine. All aid to New Haven Colony must be processed through proper channels. Your unauthorized approach violates Confederation emergency protocols." Sam looked at the faces of his crew. These people had volunteered knowing they might die, because humans were dying on New Haven and needed help. "Admiral, people are dying down there. Children are dying. We're asking for humanitarian passage. The safety of New Haven colonists is Confederation responsibility. Your interference is not required or welcome." Lieutenant Ross passed Sam a note. The Confederation fleet had powered up their weapons and were moving to intercept. 12 ships against 1 unarmed transport. "Admiral, we're not armed. We pose no threat to your fleet. We just want to deliver medicine to sick people." "Admiral." Kythera's expression didn't change. Human aggression takes many forms. Your refusal to follow proper authority demonstrates the violent nature of your species. You will withdraw immediately, or face the consequences. Sam looked at the medical supplies stacked in his cargo bay. Enough vaccines to save 300 lives. Enough antibiotics to stop the fever outbreak completely. He thought about the messages from New Haven. Parents begging for help as their children got sicker. "I'm sorry, Admiral. I can't do that." The first energy beam hit Freedom's call amidships, tearing through the medical bay and killing 4 crew members instantly. Sam's ship had no shields, no weapons, no way to fight back. The second beam destroyed the engine room. The third beam hit the crew quarters where the medical team was preparing emergency supplies. Dr. Mary Stevens was thrown against a bulkhead as the ship broke apart around her. In her last conscious moment, she saw containers of vaccine floating past her in the vacuum of space, medicine that would never reach the children who needed it. The attack lasted less than 3 minutes. When it was over, 200 medical personnel, relief workers, and crew members were dead. The supplies they carried were scattered across space-useless debris that would eventually burn up in New Haven's atmosphere. Admiral Kithara filed his report with standard Confederation efficiency. The human vessel had refused lawful orders and posed a threat to Confederation authority. The destruction of the ship was regrettable, but necessary to maintain order. On New Haven, the colonists watched their sky fill with burning debris that had once been their salvation. Parents held sick children and knew that help would not be coming. The Confederation had made their point very clearly. The news reached Earth 18 hours later. Ambassador Karen Scott sat in her office and read the casualty reports, while Confederation officials expressed their regret at the unfortunate incident. Speaker Vexhai sent a formal message explaining that the human ship had been destroyed because it violated emergency protocols. "They're calling it an accident," Karen said to her assistant Danny Brooks. "A tragic misunderstanding caused by human failure to follow proper procedures." Danny was reading the same reports but with growing anger instead of diplomatic resignation. "An accident? They blew up a hospital ship. They murdered doctors and nurses who were trying to save children." Karen stood at her window looking out at the Confederation ships that surrounded Earth like a cage. For 3 years, she had tried to work within their system. She had filed reports, attended meetings, made polite requests, and accepted condescending responses. She had believed that patience and diplomacy would eventually make them see humans as equals. The massacre at New Haven changed everything. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Defense Command," she said. "It's time to stop playing nice." Danny looked surprised. "Ma'am, Confederation protocols require all communications to be monitored." Karen turned away from the window. Her face showed something that hadn't been there before, something that reminded Danny why humans were called a Deathworld species. "I don't care about their protocols anymore," she said. "They want to see human aggression. They're about to learn what that really means." In his command bunker, General Hayes received Karen's message and smiled for the first time in months. The order he had been hoping for and dreading had finally come. Operation Prometheus was authorized. The Deathworld species was done playing by alien rules. Admiral Adam Cole stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Vengeance, and watched his fleet prepare for humanity's first real battle. 3 months had passed since Operation Prometheus began, and the human ships emerging from hidden construction yards looked nothing like the peaceful vessels the Confederation expected. "Final systems check complete, sir," reported his tactical officer, Commander Dave Stone. "All ships report ready for combat." Adam nodded. Behind him hung the battle flag that had been sewn by the families of those killed on Freedom's call. 200 names were written on that flag, including Dr. Mary Stevens and Captain Sam Turner. Today those names would be answered. The Confederation fleet waited at Proxima Station, completely unaware of what was coming. Admiral Kithara had been promoted after his successful handling of the New Haven incident. His fleet of 37 ships patrolled the system with the lazy confidence of predators who had never faced real opposition. "Sir, we're detecting the human fleet," reported Kithara's sensor officer. 12 ships approaching from the asteroid field. Kithara looked. at his tactical display with amusement. 12 ships? The humans must be even more primitive than we thought. Signal them to surrender immediately. On the Vengeance, Adam received the surrender demand and deleted it without reading. All ships, this is Admiral Cole. Remember who we're fighting for. Remember what they did to our people. Show them what a Deathworld species looks like when it stops being polite. The battle began with the human ships doing something no Confederation fleet had ever seen. Instead of forming neat lines and exchanging fire at safe distances, they scattered in all directions and attacked from every angle at once. Engineer Claire Adams had spent 3 years designing engines that the Confederation called too aggressive. Now those engines proved their worth as human ships moved in patterns that confused and terrified the alien crews. The Vengeance spun like a fighter plane while firing weapons that had been built in secret factories across human space. "They're moving too fast," Kythera's helmsman reported with panic in his voice. "I can't track their movements." The Confederation ships had been designed by species that evolved on peaceful worlds. Their tactics were based on polite dueling rules, not the chaotic violence of apex predators. They expected enemies to approach slowly and fight fairly. Human ships didn't fight fairly. The destroyer Retribution came out of the asteroid field at full speed and rammed directly into a Confederation cruiser before anyone could react. Both ships exploded, but the human crew had evacuated to escape pods first, leaving their ship to fly itself into the target. "They're insane," gasped Kythera's second officer. "They destroyed their own ship just to damage ours." Captain Jake Miller, commanding the cruiser Liberty, demonstrated another human advantage. His ship took damage that would have destroyed any Confederation vessel, but kept fighting. Human ships were built by engineers who understood that everything breaks eventually, so they designed systems that could work even when half destroyed. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, reported his damage control officer, Lieutenant Carol Webb. "But engines are still good, and weapons are operational." "Then we keep fighting," Jake replied, ordering his ship to ram speed toward the Confederation flagship. The alien crews couldn't understand what they were seeing. These humans fought like they didn't care if they lived or died, as long as they took enemies with them. It was a kind of warfare that Garden World species simply couldn't comprehend. But the humans did care about living. They just cared more about winning. On the Confederation flagship, Admiral Kythera watched his fleet fall apart around him. In 20 minutes of combat, he had lost 18 ships to an enemy force half his size. The human tactics made no sense, but they were terrifyingly effective. "Sir, the human flagship is targeting us directly," his tactical officer reported. Kythera looked at his screen and saw the Vengeance approaching through the wreckage of both fleets. The human ship was damaged, bleeding atmosphere and sparking, with electrical fires, but its main guns were still operational. "Signal surrender," he ordered. "Sir? Signal surrender. These creatures are going to kill us all." Admiral Cole received the surrender message and considered it for exactly 3 seconds before ordering his gunners to open fire. The Confederation flagship broke apart under the combined assault of every human ship still capable of fighting. The battle ended. The surviving Confederation ships tried to flee. Some made it. Others were hunted down by human fighters that moved through space like sharks through water. On the surface of Proxima Station, General Peter Hayes led the first human ground assault against Confederation forces. The alien troops surrendered almost immediately when they saw human Marines advancing without fear, through weapons fire that should have stopped any sane species. Sergeant Rick Stone kicked down the door of the Confederation Command Center and found alien officers hiding under their desks. "Ma'am," he said to his squad leader, Corporal Amy Foster, "I think they're more scared of us than we are of them." Amy looked at the cowering aliens and felt a moment of pity. Then she remembered the pictures from New Haven Colony, and the feeling passed. "Secure the facility. Make sure none of them have access to communications." The Battle of Proxima Station lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Confederation's most powerful fleet had been destroyed by a human force that the aliens had considered barely civilized. News of the victory spread across human space like wildfire, but more importantly, it spread across Confederation space too. On worlds throughout the galaxy, species that had been pacified centuries ago heard about the battle and began to remember. what they had once been. The Corvan poets started writing about war again. The Thaxian hive minds began thinking together for the first time in generations. The Ricari guards started asking why they weren't allowed to carry weapons. Admiral Cole stood in the ruins of Proxima Station and sent a message to every human colony and ship in known space. This is Admiral Cole of the Earth Defense Force. As of today, humanity is no longer under Confederation protection. We reject their authority, their guidance, and their right to control our development. He paused, looking at the wrecked alien ships floating in space around the station. Any Confederation forces found in human space will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. We tried to play by their rules. They chose to make this a war. Now they get to see what humans do when we stop playing nice. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, in all known languages. Within hours, it had reached every corner of Confederation space. The Deathworld species was awake and it was angry. Captain Jake Miller stood on the bridge of the Liberty and watched the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. Ships from dozens of different species flew alongside his human fleet, all heading toward Nexus Prime for the final battle. The Confederation's perfect order was crumbling as oppressed species across the galaxy remembered how to fight. "Sir, we're getting a message from the Corvan Battle Group," reported Lieutenant Carol Webb. "Their commander wants to thank us for showing them the way back to their warrior traditions." Jake smiled. 3 months ago, the Corvan had been quiet clerks and maintenance workers. Now they flew ships decorated with the ancient poetry of their warrior ancestors, ready to die for freedom they had almost forgotten existed. The Thaxian hive ships moved in perfect formation beside them, their collective minds working together, for the first time in centuries. When the Confederation had broken their mental connections, they thought the Thaxians would become helpless. Instead, they had learned to think as individuals while keeping their ability to share thoughts when they chose. "The Ricari want to take point position in the assault," Carol added. "They say they have 300 years of anger to work out." Jake nodded. The Ricari had been turned into bodyguards and servants, their weapons taken away, their warrior culture destroyed, but muscle memory lasted longer than cultural programming. Give a Ricari a weapon again, and they remembered very quickly how to use it. Admiral Adam Cole, commanding the combined Free Fleet from his flagship Vengeance, received reports from across Confederation space. Rebellions were breaking out on every world where species had been pacified. The Confederation's perfect peace was revealed as nothing more than enforced slavery. "Sir, Dr. Nina Ross is reporting from the Confederation archives," said his communications officer. "She's found documentation of over 50 species that were completely absorbed by the Confederation. Their cultures, their histories, everything was erased." Adam felt his jaw clench. 50 species that no longer existed because they had trusted Confederation promises of help and protection. "Make sure that information gets broadcast on all frequencies. Let the galaxy see what peaceful integration really means." On Nexus Prime, Council Speaker Vexhai stood in the emergency session chamber and watched his perfect civilization fall apart on the status displays. Red warning lights showed rebellions, fleet actions, and communication blackouts across hundreds of systems. "How did this happen?" demanded Councillor Thythe of the Hegemony. "The humans were contained. Their aggression was being managed." "We underestimated them," Vexhai admitted reluctantly. "We assumed that Deathworld conditioning could be overcome with proper guidance. We were wrong." The Zenthari councillors' 4 arms moved in agitated patterns. "One species cannot destroy our Confederation. We have managed the galaxy for over 2,000 years. One species that remembers how to fight," corrected Dr. Nina Ross from the chamber doorway. The human scientist had been studying in the Confederation archives when the rebellion started. Now she stood before the council with evidence of their crimes. One species that showed all the others what you really are. She activated a holographic display showing the genetic records of absorbed species. "The Altrani used to be brilliant, mathematicians. You turned them into accountants. The Veltar were explorers who mapped half the galaxy. You made them into tour guides. The Zephyrians were artists whose works inspired entire civilizations. You deleted their creativity and made them copy Confederation-approved designs." Vexhai's silver skin had turned pale. We brought peace to the galaxy. You brought death, Nina replied. The death of everything that made these species unique. But you made one mistake. You tried it on a species that evolved fighting for survival every single day. The chamber shook as the first explosions reached Nexus Prime. The Free Fleet had arrived. Admiral Cole stood on his bridge and looked at the massive space station that had seemed so impressive 4 years ago. Now it just looked like a target. All ships, this is Admiral Cole. Today we end the Confederation's rule. Today we free the galaxy. The battle for Nexus Prime was different from Proxima Station. This time the Confederation forces fought with desperation instead of arrogance. They knew they were fighting for their way of life. But desperation wasn't enough against species that had rediscovered their ability to fight. The Corvin ships moved like poetry in motion, each maneuver a verse in an ancient epic of battle. The Thaxian hive minds coordinated attacks with precision that no individual consciousness could match. The Rakari fought with a fury that came from centuries of suppressed rage. Captain Jake Miller led the assault on the station's main docking bay. His Marines moved through the corridors with the confidence of apex predators, while alien defenders fell back in confusion. These weren't the polite, controlled humans they had been expecting. Sergeant Rick Stone kicked down the door to the council chamber and found the Confederation leadership huddled together like scared children. "Counselors," he said politely, "you're under arrest for crimes against galactic civilization." "This is illegal," protested Counselor Thith. "We are the legitimate government of this galaxy." Corporal Amy Foster stepped up beside Rick. "Your legitimacy ended when you started committing genocide. You want to talk about legal? Let's talk about the 50 species you erased from existence." Council Speaker Vex High looked at the human soldiers and saw something that terrified him. They weren't angry anymore. They were calm, professional, and completely in control. The rage had been replaced by cold determination to see justice done. "What do you want?" he asked. Ambassador Karen Scott entered the chamber wearing the uniform of the Free Galactic Alliance. Behind her came representatives of every species that had thrown off Confederation rule. "We want you to face trial for your crimes. We want the truth about what you did to be told to every world in the galaxy. And we want to make sure this never happens again." The trials lasted for months. Evidence of the Confederation's systematic, cultural destruction was presented to representatives from across the galaxy. Species that had thought they were willing partners learned they had been victims. Worlds that had praised Confederation peace discovered they had been living in a carefully constructed prison. President Mary Johnson stood at the podium in the new Galactic Assembly building on Earth and addressed delegates from 300 different species. The building was designed with input from every member world, creating something that had never existed before. A truly representative government. "We didn't want to be conquerors," she said, looking out at the diverse crowd of beings who had chosen freedom over safety. "We just wanted to be left alone to grow and learn alongside our galactic neighbors. But when pushed too far, even the most peaceful species will fight back." She paused, thinking of the long journey from that first diplomatic meeting to this moment. "Today we establish something new. Not a confederation built on control, but an alliance built on choice. Not peace through oppression, but peace through respect. Every species here has the right to develop according to their own nature, to keep their own cultures, and to defend themselves against anyone who would try to change them." The assembly erupted in cheers from beings who had never thought they would be free to cheer again. In the end, the galaxy learned a simple lesson. Never mistake kindness for weakness, and never underestimate a species that survived by fighting. The universe itself every single day. The Deathworlders had tried playing nice. When that didn't work, they taught the galaxy what real strength looked like.